everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and this time I am building the Astra by Quest Rockets. And this is a really good beginner's kit. You do have to do a little bit of gluing, a little bit of sanding, so all of the basic skills that a model Rocketeer needs, you can start out with here. And this is basically Quest's answer to the Estes Alpha. And in some ways it's actually even a better kit. Primarily because it's got through-the-wall fin slots here, which will make the fin assembly much more robust than if we simply glued the fins onto the body tube itself. Alright, we're going to pull out the instructions here and make sure we have everything that we need. And as you can see here, a lot of the parts may be inside your instruction sheet. Alright, we already found the body tube there. Alright, we've got some self-adhesive decals, fins, parachute sheet, parachute shroud lines, and shroud line reinforcements. Okay, we've got a hybrid shock cord, so half of it's Kevlar, half of it's elastic, and that's very typical of Quest kits. And then we have a small parts package inside here that has the nose cone, 2 centering rings, a thrust ring or engine block, the motor mount tube, motor mount clip, and launch lug. So it looks like everything we need is here, and I'm going to clear this away and we will get started. The first thing I'm going to do here is actually skip ahead to step 4, and this is assembling the shock cord here. Now we're not going to mount it on yet, but since I like to put a little glue on this before we put it onto the motor mount, I want to do it ahead of time here. Okay, so what you're going to do is take approximately 1 inch, or about 25 millimeters here, of both ends, put them together like this, and then just tie an overhand knot in both of them at once. Okay, and bring that taut. Now it looks like I missed one of them, so if you don't have a knot in both of them, just do this again. I'm not quite sure how I managed to do that. We'll try this again here. Okay, so a knot with both cords there, and we're going to bring that taut. And we still want about 1 inch to hang out of the knot here for these two. Okay, and that's just to help keep them from unraveling. And as I mentioned, I prefer to use just a little dab of glue here. So just apply a little spot of wood glue or white glue, or in my case, white wood glue. Okay, it doesn't take a lot, and just work that through the knot, and that'll keep everything in place. Because one of the drawbacks of Kevlar is it doesn't hold knots very well. It's a very slick material. Alright, now I'm just going to set that aside, and we'll come back to step 1 here and assemble the motor mount. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull out all the rings. We don't need the shock cord or the launch lug quite yet. The nose cone, strangely enough, they actually use this as a tool, and it's kind of a neat idea. I'd never seen that before in a kit. Alright, but what we're going to do first of all is first find this slot. So one end of that motor mount tube should be pre-slotted. Now look carefully, sometimes you miss it. If yours doesn't, say the machine missed it or something like that, then simply measure down between about 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch from the forward end of the motor mount tube, and just cut yourself a little slot about 1/8 of an inch, or about 3 millimeters wide. Okay, because that does occasionally happen where they either don't cut the slot through all the way or the machine misses it. I'm going to take my engine clip here, and with the end that just has the 90-degree bend in it, I'm going to pop that in like that. Okay, and then the rest of the clip should hang down like this. Okay, and I am going to mark on this aft, just so I don't get it confused later on and try and mount it backwards. Alright, I'm going to take that back out for just a moment. And now I'm going to take a ruler, and as the instructions indicate, we're going to mark 1/2 inch from each end of the tube here. So there's 1/2 inch there. And if we just shift that a little bit up here, and there's another 1/2 inch mark there. And this is where our centering rings are going to go. Now we're going to dry mount some of this just to make sure it all fits. Okay, so I'm going to put my clip back in. I'm going to put a ring over that. Okay, and the ring should go inside the mark. Okay, and a lot of times it's easier just to push the aft ring all the way down from here instead of trying to get it over the hook. So there, and then we'll have another ring. Now notice that one's a little bit tight. And this is why I say you leave the nose cone out here. You can put the ring on the nose cone and use it just to stretch it open a little bit, kind of like you do with a ring mandrel if you ever do jewelry work. All right, but that makes it a lot easier to get on, and you may have to do both sides. All right, that's just a neat little trick I had never seen before, and I don't know why I hadn't thought of it beforehand. Alright, so that's going to go there, and then our thrust ring will go right at the end there. Okay, so everything's fitting together. If we go on to the next step then, okay, we're going to mount the aft ring, and only the aft ring at this moment. So I'm going to take my other 2 rings out. Alright, and I'm just going to move this inside a little bit. I'm going to run a bead of glue all around the outside edge of that ring. Alright, and you just want it even. It doesn't have to be particularly thick. Okay, and now in a quick motion here, I'm just going to move that right back to its mark. And then make sure that we don't move the engine clip there. So if that shifted a little bit, just move it till it's completely parallel with the tube. And then you can take your finger and just smush any excess glue there into a fillet. Alright, now, this is where we're going to do the other part. So I'm going to take the other end of my Kevlar here. Alright, and I'm going to tie 2 overhand knots, or a double knot, square knot, whatever you want to call it in it. And again, I'm going to leave about 1 inch on the free end of that knot down here. Okay. Now, I'm going to run that through my forward centering ring. And then that whole thing is going to go over again, like this. Okay, I'm going to go down. Where's my mark? There's my mark. Okay, so just like I did before, I'm going to move it a little bit more inside. Okay, now they're doing it from the opposite direction here, so they're starting with this, oops, up here. Get that back on. Alright, so the instructions are showing just putting the ring just at the forward edge there, and then putting the bead of glue here all the way around. Either way is fine. By doing it this way, it's easier for me to make a straight bead of glue, basically. Alright, so once again, you just want a nice even bead here. It doesn't have to be really thick. Alright, and then go ahead and pull that back up to your line. Smooth in the glue as a fillet. Alright, now if you get any up on the red surface, wipe that down. And then I'm going to put a little bit there right on that knot just to help hold it in place. Okay, and now for the next part, we're going to do the thrust ring. Now, the instructions show putting glue in the tube and putting the thrust ring in it, and that's normally the way we would do it. But in this particular case, you have the hazard of potentially running excess glue down inside the motor mount tube, which we don't want to have happen. So I'm going to apply my glue to the outside of the ring here. Okay, and then we're going to put that in the forward end, and it's going to rest right on top of the engine clip. Now it's going to try and do that where it's trying to fall in further on one side than the other, try and get that even, and then if you have excess glue here, just go ahead and run a little fillet around there. Okay, and now I'm going to let this whole thing dry for at least half an hour before we put that into the rocket. While the glue is drying on my motor mount, I'm going to skip ahead here all the way to step 13. Okay, and what they show is putting on the launch lug after the fins, which is normal, but they don't have you actually make an alignment line here. You're kind of eyeballing it between two fins, and I prefer not to do that. So instead, what I'm going to do here is, first of all, I'm going to find a midpoint. Now we'll just kind of eyeball estimate this between two of those fin slots. I'm just going to make a little mark here. And now you can take this over to a door frame or a drawer edge, or in my case, this tube marking guide that Estes makes, mainly because I can't get a door frame under the camera. All right, and I'm going to draw a line then that's approximately 6 inches long from the base. And as long as it's long enough, and some people just like to draw the whole line up there. Alright, but I'm going to put, okay, so it's going to go up about half the tube. So about like that. Okay, and the reason I made it that long is because the launch lug is going to go 4 inches from the aft end of the body tube, and so it's going to be up in here somewhere. The launch lug itself is about 1 inch, and then I like to leave a little bit ahead of that to make it easier to align. Alright, so I'm just going to set that aside. And the other thing we can do here is go ahead and mark then where that launch lug is going to be. Alright, so it's supposed to be 4 inches. So I'm just going to put a little tick mark right here. Alright, and then I can either just use a ruler and measure an additional inch, or you can take the launch lug itself, just in case your launch lug is not 1 inch long, it's shorter or longer. Alright, but now I'm just going to put that on that original mark, and then mark where the forward end is going to go. Okay, so like that. And now I'm just going to take a little bit of sandpaper. Just about any grit will do from about 80 to 150. And what I'm going to do is just roughen up the cardboard here, take that glossy finish off. Okay, just right where it's going to be. And I'm going to do the same thing over here on the launch lug itself. And this is just going to give a better gluing surface when we get to the point where we glue the launch lug on. For now, I'm going to put my launch lug back in here. Okay, and then when we've got it mounted on there, we can go ahead and erase that line later on. Okay, still waiting for the glue to dry, so let's see what else we can do here. Alright, so let's take our fins. Okay, and they come mostly cut out, not quite. In some cases these may fall apart during transit, and that's fine. Alright, but as long as the fins themselves are still intact, it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to go through with my hobby knife here and cut off these little remaining tabs inside there. Alright, and see that whole thing's kind of falling apart there. Don't force it though. If it's resisting, go back and cut through the edge. Okay, and then the excess balsa here, you can either throw away, or I have a junk box of balsa material that I just throw stuff in for making my own fins or doing repairs. Okay, and then the first thing we can do is gather these all together, stack them up aligned. All right, now this little part here where it sticks out, those are the fin tabs, and that will go through these slots here. So don't try and cut those off or sand them off. They're supposed to be there. Alright, so here you can just take some sandpaper and just put it down flat on your surface. And between 150 and 100 grit is fine for this purpose. I'm going to stack these all together again. And the first thing I'm going to do is just go through and sand each edge to make sure they're uniform. Basically, you just want to sand off the soot from the laser cutting process there. Alright, then reposition the next edge, sand those. Okay, come around here. Could use a little more. Alright, now for the root edge, you can kind of come in here with the edge of your sandpaper. Just to get off that soot. And again, remember, you don't want to actually sand down the fin tabs here. Here I've brought in just a squared off chunk of wood here. I'm going to use it as a sanding block. Now you can get fancy sanding tees like this one that do the same job, but sometimes just a small block like this is easier to work with. So I've just wrapped a little bit of 150 grit sandpaper around there. And what I'm going to do now is round this leading edge. And I'm going to start by just knocking down the edge itself a little bit. Just do this on each side. And then as we get going along here, just twist your wrist a little bit as you're going over here, and this will smooth it out. Okay, and then check in cross section on both ends as you go along to make sure that you're staying even. Okay, and that leaves a little bit more there. Alright, that's pretty good to start with. Now in the instructions, it also has us forming a knife edge on the trailing edge and on the tip edge here. And that will give you the maximum performance of the fins, but it's a trade-off. When you have those knife edges, it also makes the fins really easy to chip or break. So I generally take the opinion that unless you're trying to set an altitude record with this thing, you're better off just rounding off the forward edges and leaving the tip and trailing edges square. But that's entirely up to you. Okay, I'm going to go off camera here and do the other two fins, and then I'll come back. Now that I have the rounded leading edge here, I'm going to go ahead and sand the faces of the fins. Now if you want, and you haven't already started your kit, you can actually do this part while the fins are still in the stock sheet and just sand that whole stock sheet at once. Okay, either way is fine. All right, always sand with the grain there. Alright, and this is kind of a minimum level of fin finishing. Now in the instructions, they recommend using a sanding sealer on this as well, but they wait until the fins are attached. I prefer that if I'm going to use a sanding sealer to do it on the fins before I attach them. So that's one option for you. It's not required to fly the rocket, but it does give you a smoother finish in the end. You can also come down to a finer grit sandpaper. So I used 150 there, and I'm going to move to 320 here. 220 will also work. This balsa is really soft, so I can actually skip the intermediate. Alright, but I can do the faces of the fins here. And you can also kind of smooth out your rounded leading edge. If you rounded or tapered the other edges as well, you can give it some finer sanding. Okay, now once again, I've warned about this already, but don't sand that root edge there. Okay, so now I've got both faces sanded with the finer sandpaper. I've got my rounded rounded leading edge, excuse me. If you want, you might want to do just some square sanding there on those other edges, just to make them a little smoother as well. Okay, try to avoid rounding off the corners there. Now, some people like to do that, and if that's the way you want your model to look, that's fine. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do these other two fins with the finer sandpaper off camera. Alright, so I've got all my fins sanded here, and for the purpose of this video, this is as far as I'm going to go with them. As I said, if you want to add some other intermediate finishing in here, you can. If you decide later on that you do want to put the sanding sealer on, you can do that after the rocket's built. It just makes it harder to sand. There are also some primer options that you can use to help fill in the grain as well. All right, but for now, my engine mount is dry, and so we're ready to put this in. Now, what I'm going to do here is first take my shock cord, and I'm going to run it down through the forward end and out the aft end. Go ahead and pull it all the way down. That way we don't end up gluing it in. And then the first thing I'm going to do here is just do a dry fit. All right, to get that in. All right, and that looks pretty good. When this is installed fully, this will be flush. And then if you look in here, you should not see any rings. It should just be the yellow color of the motor mount tube. If you're seeing the red of the rings in there, it means you got one or more mispositioned, and you may be able to move this back and forth to fix that. Okay. The only reason you wouldn't be able to is if you got those two rings glued really close together. So in most cases, if you made a little bit of a mistake with the ring, you should still be good here. All right, now also, like we did with the rings, if that tube is kind of tight and you're having trouble getting the motor mount in, once more you can use the nose cone to kind of ream that out a little bit. All right, and that's going to make it easier to put in there. All right, now for this next part, I like to have a little cotton applicator like this one here. You can use Q-tips or similar types of makeup removers or cleaners, things like that. Just something that will allow you to get up inside the tube. Now if we look at the official instructions here, alright, they are going to put some glue way up inside here. Okay, and that's what we're going to do as well. We don't want the glue down here in the lower part, because as we shove the rings of the motor mount through that glue, they're going to expand, and that can sometimes end up with one ring expanding too much and you only get it part way up, and that's going to be bad for your rocket. Alright, so instead what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my applicator and mark. Alright, so I'm going to put the edge of my applicator right against that forward ring. I'm going to put my thumbnail down here, right at the edge of the aft end of the motor mount. Okay, and I'm going to put some glue on that. Alright, I'm going to put this up through the aft end of the body tube in the middle till my thumbnail hits there. Then I'm going to bring it up against an edge and just let it run all the way around there. Okay, I'm going to look down inside, and it looks like I got a pretty good ring. I'm going to put just a little bit more in there. Okay. Now, when I put this up inside there, one thing I want to make sure of is that I don't have the Kevlar visible in one of the slots, and I prefer to have my engine clip line up with my launch lug. So I'm going to put my engine clip here so it lines up with my launch lug line. Okay, and then one other thing you can do, they don't actually glue the aft ring there. You can, and the way to do that is don't use a lot of glue. We're going to make just a very, in fact that's probably more than I want right there. I'll put that right against the rings there. And this, you need to do this fast because that paper will expand. Alright, now with that where I need it there, in one motion, I'm going to slide this whole thing in. You can use a ruler to keep it flush. Just like that. Okay. And now both rings have their own ring of glue going around them. Now if you were a little bit too slow on getting this in and it locked with part of the motor mount hanging out there, as long as that aft ring is at least flush with the body tube and you've got open space here in your fin slots, it'll probably still fly without a problem. It may just look a little bit weird. All right, but now we're ready to put on the fins. And like we did with the launch lug, one of the things we can do here is just take a little bit of sandpaper and just roughen up the area just right in front and right in back of the two fin slots there. It doesn't take a lot. You don't need to wear all the way through the cardboard. Just roughen it up a little bit there. And now what I'm going to do is put a thin bead of glue across here. Now notice I chipped my tab a little bit there. That's not a big deal. Alright, but in this case, more is not better. We just want a film of glue on here because it will dry faster that way. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into the slot. Alright, make sure the glue makes contact, and then I'm going to pull this back out, and I'm going to let that dry and get tacky for about 60 seconds, and then come back. Alright, about a minute has passed, and my glue now is just a little bit tacky, and I can put this back on. Alright, line up the back edges here with body tube. Alright, make sure it's firmly in place, and now I'm going to look down the end here and make sure that the fin is perpendicular. Alright, and make sure that it's straight so you can get a little bit of wobble in that slot there. Well, that looks pretty good. I'm going to let this dry for at least 5 minutes, preferably about 10. If you're using white glue instead of wood glue, give it 15 to 20. Okay, but then once that's done, you can rotate around to the next one, do the exact same thing, let it dry for the required amount of time, and then go on to do the third one. And in between, this can be drying up on its end like this. So I will do the other two fins off camera and then come back when they're all done. While I'm waiting for the fins to dry, I'm going to go ahead and assemble the parachute. Alright, so you'll need the parachute lines here. And just kind of tease them apart. There should be 3. Okay, and there are. And we'll just do a quick check here and make sure they're all the same length. Or close to it. Alright, so those are all pretty close, but if you want, you can go ahead and trim off the ends so they are indeed equal. Alright, I'm going to set that aside for a moment. These are sticker reinforcements that we'll use after we get the parachute cut out. So for the sheet itself, we're going to open up this plastic sheet here. Okay, and it also has instructions going around here. They're the same as in the instruction sheet itself. So now I'm just going to take scissors and cut around this. Alright, now we're going to take those reinforcements, and as we peel these off, we want to leave the centerpiece behind. We don't want it. Okay, so now you got a hollow square there, and that is going to go right here. I'm going to do the same thing all the way around. Okay, now we've got all the reinforcements in. And now take a pencil or a pen tip and just poke through here. You don't want to use a knife. You want this to puncture rather than slice. There we go. Now I'm going to take one of the strings and I'm going to tie it between two adjacent holes. And the tricky part here is trying to keep the amount of string that you use to tie consistent. Alright, now we're going to tie a double knot in each. You don't have to tie this down really hard, just snug against the reinforcement. Like that. Okay, and then over here. Again, trying to keep about the same amount of string on each. Okay, so there's one, and then we're just going to continue this all the way around with the other two strings. Now I have all of the strings tied on here. And now I'm just going to loop them all around one of my fingers, like this, and then I'm going to grab the parachute in the middle and just pull everything taut. And so if we got the lengths right, all of the corners of the parachute should come down pretty much even with each other, and they do. Okay, now you can tie this directly to the nose cone here and just follow the instructions for that. But if you've seen any of my videos, you know I don't like to do that. So instead, I'm going to use a snap swivel here that you can get from fishing supply areas. Okay, and I'm going to check my length one more time. And I'm going to keep some tension on this so I don't let go of these lines now. Alright, and we've got a swivel side here and a snap side here. The snap is going to be attached to the nose cone. The swivel side, we're going to place all of those loops through that eyelet there. Okay, and again, I'm not letting go of the back. I'm going to open up all three loops again, like this. I'm going to pass the entire snap swivel through the loops, and then pull the loops downward, and I'm just going to put tension on that, and that will all knot up on there. I'm going to check my lengths once again. Okay, it looks like maybe one of them moved a little bit, but not enough to worry about. If you do need to change it, you just loosen this up and do this procedure again. Once you've got it where you want it, then go ahead and take a little bit of white or wood glue and just glue that knot into place here. Just a little bit. Okay, now I would suggest that you don't actually attach your parachute using whichever method to the nose cone until after you've painted it. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to set my nose cone aside. When we come back, we'll check on the fins and apply fillets to them. The glue on my fins is mostly dry. There's still a little bit of damp spots there, but it's dry enough that I can work with it now. Alright, and so I'm going to come back over here. I've drawn a line in between two of the fins for my launch lug, and I need to measure 4 inches from the aft end. It's about right there. Make a little mark there. And that's where my launch lug is going to go. I'm going to take just a little bit of sandpaper here. Doesn't really matter what grit. I'm using 120. I'm just going to roughen up that glassine surface a little bit. And that's going to make it easier for the glue to adhere. Alright, I'm going to take the launch lug here. And just get a nice even bead of glue. And now I'm going to apply that to where I just sanded. Okay, and now I'm going to sight down the rocket here, and I can line up the launch lug, the line on the tube, and the tube itself. Everything should be parallel. Okay, I can come over just a little bit. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to let the glue continue to dry on this, and then when it's completely dry, we'll come back and put fillets on the fins and on the launch lug. My fins are dry, and so now I'm going to apply fillets. And to do this, I'm just going to run some wood glue along the inner edges here of the fins. And you can do all of these at once as long as you keep the rocket horizontal. Alright, you're going to want to have a rag or some tissues or paper towels handy here. And I'm just going to take my finger and just smooth those in. Now, because of the fin slots, you may have some glue that kind of seeps down into the body tube, and that's fine. If it keeps doing that, just let it dry and then add an additional fillet over that. The same is true if you want to build your fillets up and have thicker, more rounded fillets. Don't try and do it all at once, do it in layers. Okay, and then once you have the fins done, go ahead and do the launch lug as well. Okay, and now we're just going to let that completely dry before we move on to painting. Here is the finished model, all painted and decals applied. So for the paint, I started out with 2 coats of primer, gave them a light sanding, and that especially knocks down any little fibers that stick up from the fins there. And then I gave it another 2 coats of this light blue paint here. Now something you notice, I've got some little bubbles in there which I did not notice before, and that's caused by air bubbles in the glue when we put the fillets in. Aesthetically it's more, and it does cause a little bit of drag, but I'm not going to go back and repaint and refillet this. Alright, also don't forget that if you left the shock cord and parachute out for painting, that you need to put those together here. Okay, so your shock cord needs to be tied on the elastic end here onto the nose cone. Tie a double knot in that, and then just add a little dab of glue to keep it from coming unraveled. And then also, if you use the snap swivel like I did here, go ahead and just snap that on. If you decided that you wanted to tie the parachute on, it's best to do that before you tie on the shock cord. Alright, but for my snap swivel here, I just need to put it together like that. Okay, and then I'm going to take my shock cord, put that back down inside the rocket. Followed by my folded parachute. Okay, now one other thing you'll want to do, give this a little shake here and see if the nose is coming out like mine. Okay, if that's the case, you can add a little bit of masking tape. You don't necessarily have to start all the way around. Just give it a little bit there and see if that's enough to hold it in. Okay, which now that is. That can change depending on the weather, so if you're going from a hot to a cold environment or vice versa, differential shrinkage of the plastic and the cardboard may cause this to become too loose, or it may cause it to become too tight. So this is something you should check before every launch. Alright, and with that, this model is done. Hope you had a great time building it. Have a safe flight and safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.